All right, let's dive right into a story that honestly feels like it's straight out of a Hollywood spy thriller, but I promise you, this is all too real. It all kicks off with one cybersecurity researcher, working late, who makes a discovery that could have stopped a national crisis dead in its tracks. So picture this. It's just before Christmas, you're a cybersecurity researcher, and you are deep inside the code of this really nasty piece of ransomware from a hacker group called DarkSide. You're on a mission, trying to dig out a decryption key for a client who'd already paid the ransom, but the tool the hackers gave them, totally useless. And you've hit a wall. I mean, every single path you take is a dead end. So you do what any smart person does when they're stuck. You call in the cavalry. In this case, your absolutely brilliant colleague, Fabian. You just know if anyone can see the flaw in the code, it's gotta be him. So together, you both dive back into the malware's tangled mess of code. And then, Fabian finds it. That's the moment of truth. You quickly load up your client's encrypted files, you plug in the key that you've just found, and boom, it works. The files are unlocked. Huge relief. But then, a second later, it hits you. This is something much bigger. See, the hackers made a rookie mistake, a critical error. They reused their main encryption key, it's called an RSA key, for multiple victims. You haven't just found one key, you found the master key. The one key that can unlock the files of every single person hit by DarkSide. I mean, it felt like a Christmas miracle, right? But this incredible discovery, well, it would very quickly turn into a massive regret. One that ties directly into a national crisis that was looming just a few months down the road. So you decide to take a holiday break. I mean, it's Christmas, right? You figure a couple of weeks won't make a difference. Big mistake. In the world of cybersecurity, a couple weeks is an eternity. While you were off, another security firm, Bitdefender, found the exact same flaw and released a public tool to fix it. DarkSide saw the news instantly, sarcastically thanked Bitdefender online for the free security audit, and immediately patched their software. Just like that, the window to neutralize them had just slammed shut. And just 4 months later, you'd be staring at your screen watching the Colonial Pipeline crisis unfolds, a national emergency caused by the very same group, DarkSide, a tragedy you came so close to preventing. So to really get how we got to this point, we need to rewind. How did a few lines of computer code get the power to bring a nation's infrastructure to its knees? Well, it all started pretty small. Way back in 1989, as you can see on this timeline, the first ransomware was actually spread on floppy disks. Yeah, floppy disks. But the criminals back then had two huge problems. One, how do you get paid anonymously? And two, how do you scale your attacks to hit more people? Gift cards in the 90s were a clunky solution, but the real game changers were, first, cryptocurrency for untraceable payments, and second, a revolutionary new business model that turned hacking into a full-blown industry. The real explosion, the thing that supercharged this whole problem, happened when hackers stopped just being criminals and started acting like entrepreneurs. They created a business model that, weirdly enough, looks a lot like one of those shady multi-level marketing schemes, but for digital extortion. It's called ransomware-as-a-service, or RAS for short. And as the slide says, it's a model where a core group of really skilled developers builds the weapon, the malicious software, and then they lease it out to less skilled criminals who they call affiliates. Those affiliates then go out and carry out the attacks, and everyone takes a cut of the profits. Now, what's really brilliant about this slide is how it breaks down the model. Think of it like a pyramid scheme. At the top, you have the developers making serious cash. Then you have the affiliates, who are basically the sales force. But instead of trying to sell you cheap lipstick, they're selling crime. And here's the key difference. Unlike that Avon seller from your high school, a RAS affiliate can make an absolute fortune. These groups, they operate like slick, professional businesses. And as you can see, they follow a ruthlessly efficient 5-step playbook for every single attack. First, get in the door. Second, look around and map out the network. Third, steal all the most sensitive data you can find. Fourth, deploy the malware and lock everything down. And finally, step 5, demand the money. We are about to see this exact playbook in action. Okay, let's get to the main event. It's 5 a.m. on May 7th, 2021. An employee at one of America's most vital infrastructure companies sits down, looks at his screen, and sees it. A ransom note. The attack was on. And the target was no accident. This was the Colonial Pipeline. Think of it as the jugular vein of the East Coast's fuel supply. It carries over 100 million gallons of gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel every single day. This was a direct hit on the heart of the American economy. So the crazy part is just how methodically they moved, following that 5-step plan to a T. If you look at this table, it all started with a single old password for a VPN account that they found on the dark web. And get this, there was no multi-factor authentication, that extra layer of security like a code sent to your phone. Nothing. From there, they spent a whole week just looking around, stealing data, and only then did they deploy the ransomware. This wasn't a smash and grab. It was a patient, calculated infiltration. And this brings us to a key tactic in modern ransomware. It's called double extortion. See, they didn't just lock the company's files. First, they stole nearly 100 gigabytes of sensitive corporate data. So now they had 2 threats they could make. 1, pay us to unlock your files, and 2, pay us so we don't leak all of your company's secrets to the world. With its billing and IT systems totally frozen, Colonial had no way to manage anything. They were flying blind, so they made a drastic decision. They shut down the entire pipeline. And that right there is the moment this digital crisis spilled over into the real world, and the panic began. Fueled by nonstop media reports of fuel shortages, people rushed to gas stations. Lines stretched for miles, fights were breaking out, and some people were even trying to hoard gasoline in plastic shopping bags. At its worst, nearly 2/3 of all gas stations in states like North Carolina had run completely dry. With immense pressure mounting from the public and the government, Colonial Pipeline's leaders had to make an agonizing choice, as this slide shows. They could either try to restore everything from their own backups, a process that could take weeks, maybe even months, or they could pay the criminals and just hope for a quick fix. They paid. Just 24 hours after discovering the attack, they sent the hackers 75 Bitcoin, worth almost $5 million at the time. But here is the kicker. The decryption tool the hackers gave them was so painfully slow, so clunky, that the company still had to rely mostly on its own backups to get their systems back online anyway. And then, in a really bizarre twist, just as the pipeline was sputtering back to life, the entire DarkSide criminal empire just vanished. As you can see from the timeline, their servers went dark, their own affiliates got locked out, and all their cryptocurrency was mysteriously drained. They put out a statement claiming they were shutting down because of pressure from the US, but the truth is probably a lot more complicated than that. The attack was finally over, but the reckoning was just beginning. This whole crisis served as a massive, painful wake-up call for both the US government and the entire private sector. And the government's response was actually pretty swift. As the chart shows, a new Department of Justice task force was created, and it even managed to claw back a big chunk of the ransom, about 63 of the 75 Bitcoin paid. The TSA issued strict new cybersecurity rules for all pipeline operators, but congressional hearings also exposed some deep problems, really poor corporate security practices, and a huge communication gap between companies and the federal agencies that are trying to help them. So, what's the key takeaway here? The Colonial Pipeline attack forced a real change in policy. It finally got ransomware treated like the national security threat it is. But it also threw a giant spotlight on just how fragile our most critical systems really are. And that leaves us with the critical question that this whole story is really about. Sure, new rules are in place and awareness